I was halfway through sanding a vintage oak chair when my daughter called to inform me, not ask, that I was taking my grandkids at 6 in the morning the next day. My name is Bernadette Walsh. I am 66 years old, a widow of 5 years, and until very recently, I was the most convenient woman in my family. I live in a quiet, single-story house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. I spend my days restoring old furniture, keeping a modest vegetable garden, and enjoying a retirement I worked 40 years as a bookkeeper to earn. My daughter Jessica lives 15 minutes away. She is 34, married to a man named Todd, and has 2 beautiful children. I love my grandchildren fiercely. What I do not love is being treated like an unpaid on-call employee in my own life. The phone buzzed against the sawdust-covered workbench. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered. "Mom, I need you here at 6 tomorrow." Jessica began, her voice entirely devoid of a greeting. "Todd has an early tea time with his boss, and I have a yoga class before my meetings. You'll need to make the kids breakfast, drop Mia at preschool, and take Leo to his soccer camp by 9. She rattled off the instructions like she was speaking into a voice recorder. No, please. No checking to see if I was available. Just a direct order delivered with the absolute certainty that I would bend my life around her schedule. For the past 3 years, I had done exactly that. I had canceled doctor's appointments, skipped lunches with friends, and given up entire weekends because Jessica assumed my time was hers to spend. I looked at the oak chair. I thought about the quiet morning coffee I had planned. "Did you hear me?" Jessica huffed. 6 a.m. "Don't be late." I took a breath. I didn't yell. I didn't offer a long, winding excuse. I gave her one calm reply. "No, Jessica. I am not available." Then I pressed the red button and set the phone face down on the bench. I knew she was staring at her screen in total shock. But I also knew exactly what she was going to do next. The phone stayed quiet for exactly 30 seconds before it began vibrating across the wooden workbench. I didn't pick it up. I picked up my sandpaper and went back to work. When the calls went unanswered, the text messages flooded in. "What do you mean? No, Mom, pick up. I already booked the class. You have nothing else to do." I swiped my thumb across the screen, switched the phone to "Do Not Disturb," and slipped it into my pocket. It wasn't a sudden malicious shift on my part. I hadn't woken up that morning looking for a fight. But resentment is a quiet thing. It builds up ounce by ounce until you realize you are carrying a boulder. When Jessica first had kids, I offered to help. I wanted to help. But somewhere along the line, my favors became her expectations. If I brought over groceries, once it became my job to restock her fridge. If I watched the kids, so she and Todd could have a date night, they started assuming I would take them every Saturday. The worst part wasn't the work. It was the complete lack of respect. Last month, I had a terrible head cold. I asked Jessica if she could find another sitter so I could rest. She sighed loudly and told me to just take some medicine and push through it. I pushed through it. And I spent the next 2 weeks coughing my lungs out in a dark bedroom while she didn't call once to check on me. I finished sanding the chair, wiped it down with a tack cloth, and went inside to make a cup of tea. The house was quiet. It felt incredibly peaceful. I opened my phone to check the time and saw 14 missed calls from Jessica and 2 from Todd. Todd never called me unless he wanted me to fix something his wife was upset about. I deleted the notifications without reading them. I knew Jessica well enough to know she didn't believe my no. She thought I was just throwing a minor tantrum and would cave by morning. Tomorrow was going to be a very rude awakening for her. I set my alarm for 5:30, fully anticipating the ambush. I dressed in my comfortable walking clothes, laced up my sneakers, and packed a small thermos of coffee. My friend Martha and I had planned a morning hike at the nature reserve across town. I hadn't made the plans up just to spite Jessica. They had been on my calendar for 2 weeks. At exactly 5:50, Tires crunched onto the gravel of my driveway. Car doors slammed. I stood in my kitchen sipping my coffee, watching through the front window. Jessica marched up the walkway, holding Mia by one hand and practically dragging Leo with the other. She looked furious. She didn't knock. She just twisted the doorknob and pushed her way into my foyer. "Mom!" she barked, dropping a diaper bag onto my clean floor. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I do not have time for it. I am going to be late." I walked out of the kitchen picking up my car keys. I didn't look angry. I didn't raise my voice. "I told you yesterday I was not available, Jessica." She stared at my sneakers, her face twisting in confusion. "Where are you going?" "You're retired. You don't have anywhere to be at 6 in the morning." "I am going hiking with Martha," I answered calmly. "Cancel it," she snapped. "Todd already left. I can't take them with me. You have to stay here." "I don't have to do anything," I replied. I crouched down and gave both of my grandchildren a kiss on the forehead. "Grandma loves you very much. Be good for your mother today." I stood up, stepped around Jessica, and walked out the front door. "Mom, you can't just walk out," she yelled from the porch as I got into my car. I rolled the window down slightly. "Lock the door on your way out, Jessica." I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing on the lawn, holding two confused children, her mouth completely open. The boundary was set. The hike with Martha was beautiful. The morning air was crisp, the trails were empty, and for the first time in years, I didn't have a nagging anxiety in the back of my mind about what time I needed to rush back. While we walked, I had a lot of time to think. Setting a boundary about my time was one thing, but time wasn't the only resource Jessica had been draining from me. Over a year ago, Jessica had linked my credit card to her grocery delivery app. She claimed it was just for emergencies when she needed diapers or formula and Todd was between paychecks. I had agreed, wanting to ensure my grandchildren had what they needed, but emergencies had slowly morphed into routine. Lately, she was placing weekly orders for premium steaks, expensive organic snacks for Todd, and cases of sparkling water. When I gently brought it up, she brushed it off, saying, "Mom, you have a fixed income, but you own your house outright. We have a mortgage. It helps us out." She was spending $400 of my money a month without a second thought. When Martha and I sat on a bench near the lake to drink our coffee, I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to call Jessica to argue about the groceries. Arguments require two participants, and I was retiring from the debate team. I opened my banking app, navigated to the card management section, and tapped, "Report, card, lost, stolen." The app asked if I wanted to issue a replacement card with a new number. I tapped, "Yes." In less than 3 minutes, the invisible financial string tying me to her household was completely severed. The old card was permanently deactivated. I put my phone back in my pocket, feeling lighter than the morning breeze. I knew Jessica usually placed her grocery order on Thursday afternoons to prepare for the weekend. Today was Thursday. It wouldn't take long for the dominoes to fall. The phone call came at exactly 2:15 that afternoon. I was in the garden tying up some overgrown tomato plants. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," Jessica's voice was frantic, tinged with outrage. "Did you put a freeze on your account?" The grocery app just declined the payment. I kept my voice entirely neutral. "No, I didn't put a freeze on the account." "Then why isn't it working? I have $200 worth of groceries waiting to process." "I replaced my card this morning," I explained simply. "The old number is deactivated." There was a heavy pause on the line. "Okay. So, text me the new number." "I won't be doing that, Jessica." "What?" Her voice spiked an octave. "Mom, I need those groceries for the weekend. Todd invited his friends over for a barbecue. Then Todd can pay for the barbecue, I replied, adjusting a tomato cage. I am tightening my budget. You will need to use your own cards for your household expenses from now on. Are you punishing me because of this morning? She demanded. Because you're throwing a fit over watching your own grandchildren, I am securing my finances, I answered. Have a nice afternoon, Jessica. I hung up before she could start screaming. She tried to call back 3 times. I ignored them all. Then the silent treatment began. Jessica always used silence as a weapon, assuming I would crumble without her attention. She was banking on my desperation to see the grandkids to force my compliance. She was wrong. I went inside, washed my hands, and walked into my spare bedroom. For 2 years, Jessica had treated this room as her personal storage unit. It was piled high with old baby gear bins of outgrown clothes and broken toys she was meaning to sell. I pulled a stack of heavy-duty trash bags from the kitchen. I didn't wait for her permission. I started packing. It took me 4 hours to clear the room. Everything belonging to Jessica and the kids went into neatly tied black bags or heavy plastic totes. I didn't throw anything away, but I did not keep it in my house. I hauled every single bag and box out to my covered back patio, stacking them neatly against the brick wall. By evening, the spare bedroom was empty. I dragged in my sewing machine, set up my reading chair by the window, and reclaimed the space entirely for myself. For the next 4 days, I heard nothing from my daughter. Then, on Tuesday afternoon, a text popped up. No greeting. Todd's mother is flying in on Friday to see the kids. We're bringing her over to your house for dinner at 6. She wants your pot roast. I stared at the screen. Susan, Todd's mother, was a piece of work. She lived in Florida, never sent a dime for the kids, and treated my home like a free restaurant whenever she visited. Jessica always fawned over her, desperate for her approval, while treating me like the hired help in the background. In the past, I would have spent $50 on a roast, scrubbed my baseboards, and cooked all day just to keep the peace. I tapped out a quick reply. I will not be hosting dinner on Friday. Enjoy your time with Susan. The typing bubble appeared, immediately vanished, and appeared again. Mom, stop it. She specifically asked for it. We already told her we were coming. I didn't engage with her panic. I typed one final response. I am busy Friday. Do not bring guests to my home without an invitation. I set the phone down. I knew Jessica's stubbornness. She hated looking bad in front of her mother-in-law. She thought if she just pushed hard enough, my manners would override my boundaries. She thought she could force my hand by simply showing up. I decided to make sure she understood exactly how wrong she was. Friday evening arrived. I did not buy a roast. I did not scrub the baseboards. Instead, I baked a single portion of salmon for myself, poured a glass of white wine, and sat on my front porch with a good book. The weather was mild, the neighborhood was quiet, and I felt perfectly at ease. At 5:55, Todd's oversized SUV turned onto my street. I didn't move from my chair. I simply turned the page of my book. The car parked. Todd got out, looking irritated as usual, helping his mother Susan from the passenger side. Jessica climbed out the back, herding the kids. She took one look at me sitting on the porch with my wine and froze. Bernadette! Susan called out, waving a manicured hand. So lovely of you to have us. I've been starving for that roast of yours all day. I smiled politely. Hello, Susan. It's nice to see you. But there must be some confusion. I'm not hosting dinner tonight. Susan stopped walking. She looked at Jessica. What does she mean? Jessica flushed a deep, blotchy red. She marched up the walkway. Mom, what are you doing? I told you we were coming. And I told you I wasn't hosting, I replied, taking a sip of my wine. I assume you have a backup plan for your mother-in-law's dinner. Todd stormed up the path, puffing his chest out. Bernadette, this is ridiculous. You're embarrassing us. Just let us in and figure something out. My doors are locked, Todd, I said, setting my glass down. You assumed you could force your way into my home after I said no? That was a poor decision. I suggest you find a restaurant before it gets too late. Susan huffed loudly. Well, I have never been treated so rudely in my life. She turned and marched back to the car. Jessica glared at me, her eyes stinging with tears of embarrassment. I can't believe you. Drive safe, I told her quietly. They piled back into the SUV and sped off. I finished my wine. But when I went inside to wash my glass, I noticed something missing from the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. The spare key with the yellow plastic tag was gone. I always kept it in that bowl for emergencies. I hadn't given it to Jessica, but she knew where it was. Thinking back, I remembered her ducking into the house briefly a few weeks ago to use the restroom while Todd waited in the car. She had taken it. She thought that if she possessed a key, she possessed access regardless of what I said. I didn't call her to demand it back. Confrontation was exactly what she wanted, a chance to yell, cry, and make herself the victim. I preferred permanent solutions over temporary arguments. Saturday morning, I drove to the local hardware store. I bought 2 new heavy-duty deadbolts, one for the front door and one for the back. I am not a helpless woman. I own a drill and I know how to use it. It took me less than 45 minutes to remove the old locks and install the new ones. The satisfying click of the new deadbolt sliding into place felt like closing a thick vault door on my old life. I tossed the old locks and the remaining keys into the outdoor trash bin. I didn't announce the change. I didn't send a warning text. A boundary isn't something you have to explain repeatedly. It is simply a wall you stand behind. Over the next 2 weeks, the silence from Jessica's camp was absolute. I enjoyed my quiet mornings. I visited the local farmer's market. I spent hours in my newly reclaimed spare room sewing a quilt for my own bed. I also talked to my son Ryan, who lived in Texas. When I told him what had been happening, he laughed out loud. Good for you, Mom. Todd and Jessica have been taking advantage for way too long. Stand your ground. I intended to. I knew Jessica was planning a weekend trip to a vineyard for her friend's wedding at the end of the month. She had mentioned it in passing months ago. The real test of the new locks came faster than I expected. It was a crisp Saturday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen island reading the newspaper and drinking a cup of dark roast coffee. At 8:30, I heard the familiar heavy tread of Todd's SUV on the gravel outside. I didn't get up. I just turned a page of the paper. Through the kitchen window, I saw them. Todd was hauling 2 small suitcases out of the trunk. Jessica was holding the kids' hands, marching toward my front door with the supreme confidence of someone who thought she had outsmarted me. She reached into her purse and pulled out the spare key with the yellow tag. I heard the metal slide into the lock. Then I heard the rattling. She jiggled the handle. She pushed her shoulder against the wood. She tried the key again. Clatter. Jiggle. Thump. Todd, it stuck. I heard her yell through the thick glass. Todd dropped the bags and stomped up to the door. He tried brute force, rattling the knob so hard the frame shook. The lock is different. He realized, his voice muffled, but audible. Panic set in. Jessica started pounding on the wood. Mom, open the door. Our flight leaves at 11. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I stood up, walked into the foyer, and unlocked the deadbolt from the inside. I opened the door exactly 6 inches, leaving the heavy chain engaged. Can I help you? I asked, perfectly calm. Jessica's face was pale. You changed the locks. Mom, open the door. We have a flight. You have to watch the kids. I don't have to do anything, I replied. You didn't ask me to babysit. I'm telling you now, she shrieked. We already paid for the hotel. Just take them. No, I said. You stole a key from my home because you thought you could bypass my consent. You cannot. Todd stepped forward, his face red. Bernadette, open this door right now. We don't have time for your games. I looked Todd dead in the eye. Get off my porch. I closed the door, engaged the deadbolt, and walked back to my coffee. Outside, the screaming turned to desperate arguing between the two of them. They didn't make their flight. From what Ryan told me a few days later, Todd and Jessica spent the weekend fighting in their living room. They lost the money for the non-refundable hotel and the flights. For the first time in their marriage, they had to face the consequences of their own entitlement without me acting as their financial and logistical safety net. It took 3 weeks for Jessica to reach out again. She didn't show up at my house. She sent a text. Can we talk? I think things got out of hand. It was a weak apology, conditional, and avoiding real accountability. But it was a crack in her armor. I replied, we can get coffee next week. But my home is not a daycare, and my bank account is not yours. If you understand that, let me know what day works. She agreed to a Tuesday. When we met, she was quiet, stripped of the demanding tone she had used for years. We didn't have a tearful cinematic reunion. We had a brief, polite conversation. I told her I loved her and the kids, but the era of me managing her life was permanently over. If she wanted me to see the grandchildren, she would bring them over for a few hours on a Sunday, and she would stay and visit too. She nodded. She had no choice. She had realized finally that she possessed zero leverage. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like a woman 20 years younger. When I got home, I walked into my newly organized sewing room. The afternoon sun was pouring through the window, catching the dust motes in the air. The house was perfectly beautifully silent. I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel guilty. I sat down in my favorite chair, picked up the quilt I was working on, and smiled. I had spent so long being a supporting character in my daughter's life that I had forgotten how good it felt to be the author of my own.